Hello, everyone. We have gathered together a number of people from around the life of our church who have expertise in the medical field, expertise and experience. And we just wanted to open up this whole discussion on the topic of the vaccine. You'd have seen me mention a few weeks ago in church that just some basic guidelines of how we approach this whole topic. And I said that Christians must not divide or marginalize others around these matters. These are matters of conscience, and we need to take our time to study and to seek the Lord and to get well-rounded views on these topics. And that's what we're here to do. We're not here to tell anyone what to do or to dictate or to tell people what they should do with their lives. This is an opportunity for us to inform and have an open discussion. And that was one of the other things I said. I really believe that our church should be a safe place for healthy and honest discussion on these matters without dividing, and really helping one another as we seek out the position that we're going to take for our families and our lives on this matter of the COVID vaccine. And I really did say that I really wanted to speak against any kind of speculation or unsubstantiated conspiracies that really 2 Timothy 2 makes really clear that as Christians we should have no part of. We don't want to follow old wives' tales. We really want to be able to examine all sides of the story. So that's what we're going to try and do here, and that's why I've gathered each of these folks. Maybe you could just tell us who you are. Welcome, everyone. Maybe you could just, for Ade, tell us a little bit about, briefly what you do.
Hello there. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Ade. I'm an NHS pharmacist. I also work actively to educate people about health choices, including vaccinations as well. I'm just really trying to empower people to make the right choices about their health using the right information to do that.
Awesome. Jonathan.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jonathan Eade. I was a GP in London for 25 years. So I had about 2,500 patients under me, and there was a practice of about 11,000 patients. And I really enjoyed that work for all those years. And of course, we did vaccination programs for all our patients. So I'm familiar with that practice. I did, Sandra and I felt called out of our medical work. It's 12 years ago now. So we've been out of practice for some time. I keep in touch with some of my medical colleagues and get medical journals. But so my perspective might be a little bit more in general rather than up-to-date current expert on particular subjects.
No, we're just grateful to have you here, Jonathan. Thank you for coming. And Emmanuel.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel Aduku. I'm an academic and researcher. So my field is microbiology. So I'm not a virologist, which is what people who might be focusing on the vaccine side of it would be, but I'm able to talk about different aspects of things that might be related to microbiology. At some point, I also worked in the clinical research sector. So in terms of some of the conversations around how vaccines are developed, how drugs are developed, and some of the ethics around it and things like that, these are some of the things that I would have dealt with in my time in clinical research. So that's what I do.
Right. And Dr. Chinedu.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chinedu Nkole. I'm a consultant in stroke and general medicine in one of the NHS hospitals. I have a master's in public health with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So I'm fairly well acquainted with the subject we are discussing. I currently also am one of those in the front line against the battle against COVID-19. And I hope my experience and the knowledge we're going to share here will help many people make an informed decision. Thank you.
Ade, you're going to kick us off. We've got this question around what the current vaccinations that are going to be in the pipeline and the current one that's available. Could you just tell us a little bit about the background of them and what's been involved in them bringing them to the public?
So in December, early part of December, the government announced that we had a series of news speculation and actually press releases about 3 candidate vaccines. The first one was the Pfizer vaccine, and what those things were telling us about was the results from the clinical trials that had come out for them. And then we also then had another vaccine, which is the Moderna vaccine in the UK as well. Another, a splash of news and research papers about how effective that was. And then we've also had the Oxford vaccine, as it's called now, which is the collaboration between the university and AstraZeneca as well, which we also had information about. So as we're coming toward the end of the year, 2 of those vaccines have now been licensed for use in the UK. So we've had the Pfizer one, which people would have heard about, which was the one that you had to store at minus 70 degrees and that was the beginning of the NHS vaccination program, which started on the 8th of December. Now we've also had that the Oxford vaccine has also been licensed in the UK for use as well, and that's a bit more conventional. It's more storage of that is more like a flu vaccine in there, and we expect that at some point as well, after the Moderna vaccine has gone through the necessary process for accreditation and evaluation of its safety, that may also get vaccinated. But we still call that one a candidate vaccine. And what that means is that the reason why we have so many different vaccines coming out is also that we are looking at really vaccinating a whole population. But it's not just us. So, this is a global effort. So there is a massive, there are all the vaccines also in the world as well, that other countries are doing. But the story of the vaccine program and the speed at which it's done, and I know sometimes people are a bit worried about that, is really been driven by this massive collaboration. Never before have so many people come together to work. And also really about resources. I mean, the UK has invested 6 billion into the research around this. So you can see really why things have moved on, and also a different way of licensing and evaluating things, whereby instead of getting a big document dump at the end of the whole research thing, everybody was sending things across for people to come back with questions and scrutinize it. So I think those are things, but we've got 2 licensed vaccines and we are likely to have 1 more in the UK. So we have 3, but around the world, you also hear of other vaccines as well, because everybody's sharing information and really working towards this at pace.
And for others of you as well, how would you respond to people who have questions about the safety of the vaccines because they've come out so quickly, and there's lots of other fears related to whether or not they're safe to take? What would you say to that?
Well, I'll say the Pfizer vaccine, the trial, the volunteers were 42,000. Which is a very strong power of study. And half of them took the placebo and half took the vaccine. And no major problem has been reported so far, apart from when it was then rolled out during the trial. No major problem was reported. 170 people actually got the virus. Out of the 170 people that got the virus, only 8 of those that took the vaccine had the virus. The rest took placebo, which is what gave it the 95% efficacy. But what I haven't said that, what I can then say is after it's been rolled out, there's been a reported incidents of severe allergic reaction in the UK as well as in the US. And so it's advised that if you have a history of severe allergy, is probably not the one to take. But apart from that, widely, millions of people have been vaccinated and they've not had any problems so far. And the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is looking like it's going to have, in terms of safety profile for those people that have allergy, looking like that's likely going to be safer for them. But again, it's for every individual to do their own research on these vaccines and make an informed decision on which one they want to go for.
Just to comment on that, I think for vaccines or any drugs to be developed, there is a lot of robust. There are sort of robust approaches to developing the virus, but also organizations or groups that actually monitor the type of studies that are done, which is partly where some of the ethics stuff comes in. So in the UK, you have an organization called the MHRA, Medicine and Health Regulation Agency. So they are the ones who regulate the type of stuff that would go out. So before it would come out and be used in a human being, it would have gone through quite a lot of phases. So what Chinedu was talking about in terms of the numbers of people, that number was in what we normally describe as a phase 3 clinical trial. So before you have a drug developed, you have to go through phase 1, 2, and 3. And in phase 3, you have a very large body of people who would receive that trial compound. And so what you're looking at is safety, quality. In this case, what we're looking at is safety, quality, and effectiveness of the vaccine. So those numbers that we're seeing about the 90%, 95%, 75% is based on the effectiveness of the drug. But in terms of safety, usually safety and tolerability at the beginning phase, but you're looking at safety, quality, and though the compounds that have been released or the candidates that we see are regarded as safe. Now, in terms of the, as you mentioned, the pace at which we've gone about this, I think something which Ade alluded to in terms of coalitions coming together. Previously, different organizations, different companies do their own compound. They work on so they have a plethora of compounds that they work with, and then they have target compounds that they just want to identify because that's where the income comes in. But I think because of the nature of the pandemic, and usually we see that when you have something like a major pathogen or a major pandemic, you might find occasional coalitions or groups coming together. But I think this is a larger scale coming together, even the database to be able to monitor, look at what's going on in different countries, the genome sequence, which came from China very early on, which is one of the things that would have helped with the development of some of the vaccines, especially when you're looking at the mRNA vaccine. So all of these things have been very, very useful. So in effect, I think there's a positive element of this. It shows that we can actually work together, that we don't always have to be apart, and we can actually work together for the benefit of humanity. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that this pandemic has also shown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there is just to add to that, there's a huge amount of diligence and serious research undertaken, which is not done lightly. In the case of vaccines, because of course you're talking about huge numbers of people that are going to be vaccinated, so the intensity in the collaboration has been of a high quality as the companies have sought to develop this. In terms of my experience of any kind of medicine or vaccination, is that once it's been developed and starts to be rolled out to the larger population, there's always going to be moments where perhaps unexpected reactions occur. That's true with aspirin, for example, in children. It was prescribed for children for many, many years, and then somebody discovered that perhaps it wasn't a good idea because of a rare reaction. But the developers of vaccines look at these possibilities, and generally speaking, with vaccines, you don't get too many surprises after they've been released and large populations are vaccinated. So I'm not expecting to find any great surprises in the coming months in terms of other vaccines that I've seen in the past. Despite the fact it was developed quickly, all due diligence, I believe, has been applied to the development of these vaccines. But the guys who are perhaps closer to the coalface would be able to comment on that, whether they feel I think the message I seem to be picking up from you guys is that they have developed these vaccines in the same way with the same amount of care as usual. It just the process has been speeded up by international collaboration, if I'm correct.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to throw this in a bit of a curveball because we didn't mention this question before, but where do you go for your information? Because there's lots of people that I talk to, they don't know where to go, or they just sometimes they just receive and are just awash with lots of different theories and ideas on these topics. Where are some of the safest places and the best places to go to find out this kind of information?
I think one of the things that we have to also appreciate is that increasingly, especially over the last few months, we have all become much more insular. And what you may find yourself in is that you put yourself in a position whereby the information that you are getting is from just a very select group of people. And if those people share your fears, what happens is that they amplify your fears. Because they share your fears as well. So we are less exposed to people because we are not going out as much. And so really, one of the things that we'll tell people is that, to look for independent, information. And actually, as a Christian, to look for Christian believers, people that share, because the one thing that brings us all together is a love for God. So even if you think, well, I've got institutional information, government information, and I've got some sort of reservations, can I really believe that? One of the things you can then say is actually, can I go to and can I look at what Christians say and take a variety of information as well? Because we all need to be more like the Bereans. We need to look and spend some time collating that information and actually thinking, how is this consistent as well? So, and one of the things about the research around vaccines, for example, is there's a lot of the research about this is actually open, is published. So, of course, if you're not a scientist, you wouldn't go digging into it. But be careful. Think about it. If somebody is criticizing the vaccine, are they referring to the research? Because if they haven't read the papers, that means they know nothing about it. Well, they're not as credible as somebody, let's say like Dr. Chinedu, who's saying, well, there are 42,000 people dead. And think, oh, he's actually read that. He knows a bit more. But it's easy to put out a little video on YouTube saying, I don't believe in this, I don't like it. But actually, you're thinking, he doesn't sound like he knows anything. He hasn't mentioned anything in the 10,000 pages of research. So most likely he hasn't even had a look at it. So I think we need to be more discerning. But also, we also need to appreciate the fact that in the NHS, there is a plurality of voices. Every one of us will speak for what we believe, and that's the value of the system itself. So nobody kind of goes with the system thing. If you don't agree with that, you can say, well, actually, I don't agree with that, and that's the beauty of our system, is that it accepts that.
That's great. I think we could use that as a way to sort of leap into this next whole topic of really theories and ideas behind, well, what's behind the rolling out of this vaccine. There are people that feel that there is an agenda at work behind the rolling out of the vaccine. Do any of you feel there's any credibility in that?
Well, can I just come in? And I fully 100% agree with Ade, because a lot of wrong and very dangerous conspiracy theories are flying around on social media, on WhatsApp. You see videos and you're like, what's this guy even talking about? He doesn't have any facts to back them up. Coronavirus is not new. It has always been there. It causes like 35% of upper respiratory tract infection. It's just that we had the first virulent strain in 2002, which was our SARS-CoV-1 that we had that period. Fortunately, that ran its course. It wasn't as bad as what we're experiencing now. Now, this is SARS-CoV-2. That's the second most virulent version of coronavirus, which broke out in China in November 2019. That's where the name came from, COVID-19. This is real. This has got absolutely nothing to do with 5G technology or all the conspiracy theories going around. I'm on the front line. I deal with these patients on a daily basis. This is real. People are dying from this virus. Please, the Bible says in Hosea 4:6, my people perish for lack of knowledge. They do not, like Ade said, go to people who are well informed about these things. Don't just buy anything you get on the internet or on social media. Now, about whether this is mark of the beast, and I think that's it's to me. I know I don't want to sound super spiritual, but the mark of the beast is clear in Revelation. If you read Revelation 13:8, it says, those whose names are not written in the book of life. And Pastor Steve, there was a message you preached 2 Sundays ago that resonated so well with me, and that's that we should stop looking for the beast. That's not what we're meant to be doing as Christians. Instead, we should look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. God is not an author of confusion. The mark of the beast, 666. It's completely different from how the vaccine is produced. The Pfizer vaccine, for instance, is they use synthetic. It's injected in a synthetic material. with fat kind of liquid form. So it's just like other vaccines. So that aspect is really wrong, and we shouldn't be buying into that because that's very dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. And sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, this is just another vaccine. A lot of the diseases that were very common even when I was a kid, tells you how old I am. We used to get those diseases, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, all of those things. And meningitis was much more common, and you just don't get those numbers of potentially serious diseases anymore. They're part of standard medical care in this country, and these vaccines have been developed in the same way against a specific illness. So there's nothing unusual. I agree with Chinedu. There's nothing unusual about these vaccines and the motivation behind them. I think Revelation, if you read Revelation, it's quite clear that we will definitely know. There won't be any doubt in a Christian's mind whether they're being asked to take a mark. So I don't see this in the same category. And I agree with, I think it was Ade talking about where we get our information from. I think there is a difference I've noticed between, I've lived in America for a while, not that long, but enough. And I lived in Canada as well. And a lot of videos come out of America particularly, and there is a different culture there. There's medicine is not free at the point of use, and it contrasts quite different. It's quite a difference between America and the UK in terms of regulation of medicine. Now, I'm not saying the US is a poor health system, but there's completely different culture there, and I could wax lyrical about the differences. But basically, the NHS, when it puts out information, does it well, and those are a good place to go and find your information from an NHS website. On the whole, they're open, honest. I say honest, they give you the pluses and minuses of most medicines. You can find out good information from there. If you live in America, it's a whole different ballgame. And when you go to conspiracy theories, often a lot of them will come out of YouTube videos from America. And there's a good reason for that, but I won't go into it now. But I think it's good to go to most British websites are pretty reliable. The sort of official ones. So I would go with that for your information first of all.
So what I'd say on this is we're going to have some links at the bottom of this YouTube clip that will point you to some academic articles and some Christian theological articles as well, discussing this in some detail as well. There are some questions around, especially from the BAME community, as to whether or not the reasons and theories behind why there seems to be a disproportionate number of BAME people affected by COVID, and this has affected how they then view the vaccine. So what would you have to say on that matter?
I think there will be, and Ade and I have discussed this several times, there will be some vaccine hesitancy in terms of people taking the vaccine within the BAME community, because when you have the sort of conspiracy theories, a lot of these conspiracy theories tend to also go quite a lot into the BAME community as well. So there needs to be quite a lot of work that goes into how is the information about the pandemic communicated? Because actually, you can't do a one-size-fits-all strategy for communicating that there is a pandemic and then there's a vaccine. And I think sometimes when you have that approach, it really doesn't work. I'll use the example of Ebola. So we published a paper last year where we looked at different communities and how they received communication. Some of the successes that happened were because of the nature of the communication. And in some cases where there wasn't any success was because people didn't trust the communication. So one of the things we're currently working on is doing a project where we're looking at actually what's the best way to communicate that information. How does the government communicate that you are 3 times more likely to have a virus, which is a deadly virus? So that's a very important question to ask. And then how does the government also communicate that you take the vaccine when it comes out, or that you are going to be maybe a priority candidate for the vaccine? So these things are very important. But in terms of the feeling that people have, I think there was a study of people who worked in the NHS. There are quite a lot of people that they surveyed about why they felt there was an increased risk in the BAME community. And as we were discussing earlier, one of the things is people who are on the front lines. So we have gentlemen here who are on the front lines. If you look at a lot of the areas where you have higher numbers of infections, if you look at care homes, if you look at areas where people are just on the front lines. So if you think about when we had the initial lockdown, look at a lot of people who are on the front lines, people who cannot actually afford to take time off from work because they might have 2-3 children. Look at the size of the apartments some people live in. So if you go into a lot of the BAME communities, you might have them living in apartments with larger families. If you have a large family and there's a respiratory virus, where are you going to hide? So as an academic, one of the things we also sort of get to think about is, well, how does one even get to study when you have a big family, 5-6 people, 4 people in a 2-bed house? How do you even navigate all of those things? So all of these things are important factors to consider that could influence the spread of the virus. But also how then, so for me, the solution then becomes, how do we get to communicate that this vaccine is safe, that there's nothing wrong with the fact that you're at risk doesn't mean there's something wrong with you as well, because I think some people might refuse to take the vaccine because of that.
Yeah, that's been so helpful. And certainly, Ade, you're on the kind of front line in the rolling out of this recent vaccine. What's the kind of responses that you're seeing in terms of people? How open are people to this?
I think one of the things that we over the last year especially we've become very aware of is how a lot of people feel very invisible. Actually, they feel invisible to the system, their anxieties, their aspiration, their pain. And when COVID swept in, what it then did was actually they then became targets as well. So you first of all you think nobody cares about me, and then all of a sudden you become a target, and that's really traumatic. And we as Christians, we are people that believe in the redeeming, enhancing power of God's love, and that's it. And I think one of the choices that the vaccine provides for us is really to say that actually you're not a victim anymore. You're not vulnerable. This is part of a provision from God for us to protect us, because it's protecting. And the pain for me is that when you hear members of my community, our faith community, for example, saying, well, I don't want it, you think, well, the other people across the road are protecting their lives. The choice is, am I going to protect my life and my family and my community, or am I going to keep being vulnerable and then keep looking over my shoulder thinking, am I okay or not? And I think we've lost sense because of the injustices. We've lost sense of where actually we need to correct things. And as a community, we have a role as well to do more for each other. And I think one of the good things about conversations like this is where people have not had opportunity to have conversations like this, they hold their own beliefs and anxiety inside and form an opinion from it. But actually, by hearing it and saying it's okay for you not to think it's right for you to have this, but consider this or talk to somebody about this, and maybe you change your mind in a while, but look at the people that have had it, look at people, are they okay, what did they tell you, because it's fine. But also we also know that actually as a community looking after people from minority background, we also need to take better care of each other, because maybe the system has never really appreciated them so much. The people are working very vulnerable, very vulnerable roles. They're working long hours. They don't have so much time and energy to look after their own self. So there is that conversation. But I think there is that anxiety. But as more people see other people actually having it and being okay, they start to think, actually, maybe I've got my own fears misplaced. And I think that's really the message to anyone is, think about it, talk to people about it, but it's not, don't feel ashamed, don't feel as if, you're under any pressure, like Pastor Steve has mentioned before. It's okay to have your position, to talk about it. We respect that, but also look at the truth.
Yeah, I would say, Adi mentioned fears, and I think it's easy to assume that somebody's doesn't want to have a vaccine because of this, that, and the other. But actually, each person is likely to have a different set of reasons why, and so it's good to listen to each other. And when we have opportunity to share those fears and find out what's behind them, because they may not be what we think they are, and so addressing those fears can be very helpful when we're sharing information with one another as a community. To actually, on an individual basis, to find out what's going on for that person, why they are concerned. And the other thing I'd probably add, some of the things research papers I've had a look at talk about different ethnic groups having different vulnerabilities in terms of nutrition. And so that's another aspect we can talk about. I know we're talking about vaccines tonight, but obviously nutrition is a big issue. And vitamin D is an interesting one, which seems to be very, very protective, but runs low in certain populations that live at a certain latitude above the equator, because they don't get enough vitamin D in the winter. And vitamin D is very protective, it seems, from a large amount of studies. And so these and BAME communities tend to have lower levels of vitamin D. So these are another factors that we can bring into the equation. I know that's off topic, but yeah, just to disseminate information that's relevant to the communities that we're addressing.
Well, I just want to thank you all for so much for just giving up your time this evening to have this discussion. I know it's going to really help a lot of people just process and come to some of their own conclusions and decisions in a level-headed, clear way. So I'm really thankful for your time this evening and thankful for your expertise and the work that you're doing. So God bless you and thank you for being a part of this discussion.